My name is Rachel Pierce. I'm 34 years old, born in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I used to be a combat systems officer in the United States Navy. Used to be. That's the part people like to emphasize used to be. But I remember the exact moment that changed. You're just another washed-up Navy girl in the wrong place. That's what he said just before he raised the barrel of his AK to my face. The words echo inside my skull like a bell rung too close. I taste blood in my mouth, coppery and warm. My breath is ragged, chest heaving as I kneel in the dust. My uniform is torn halfway down the side from the explosion that threw me across the compound wall. The collar hangs loose, revealing skin no one's supposed to see. Not here, not now. I blink through the haze. I'm in the middle of a half-constructed villa outside Letitia, Columbia. Sheet metal roofing flaps above like the wings of a wounded bird. The sky is a blistering gray ready to crack open. Thunder rumbles somewhere behind the jungle. The man speaking to me, Renko the contractor turned mercenary, stands with one boot planted inches from my knee. His voice carries an oily confidence like someone who's shot people kneeling before. He's not a soldier. He's a hyena in human skin. And the worst part, he thinks I'm nothing. Cole is standing behind him. My ex, my former commanding officer, the one who brought me on this mission and never even looked me in the eye during the brief. Now he's letting them talk to me like I'm a problem to be disposed of. His jaw is tight arms folded. I don't know if he's ashamed or angry, or if he feels anything at all anymore. I swallow back the taste of betrayal, force my back straighter even as my ribs scream. I clench my jaw and glance down. My sleeve is torn enough now that the top of my shoulder is exposed, and with it the seal, black ink perfectly curved. A ghostly eagle, its wings in a dive talons, extended the edges surrounded by 7 hash marks, the seal that ends all missions. Nobody's supposed to know what it means. If you have to ask, you're not cleared to know. Renko does a double take. His smirk falters. He steps back 1 inch, then another. "Where'd you get that?" he mutters. Not loud now. Almost careful. Cole sees it too. His eyes narrow. His arms unfold. "You're not supposed to be," he starts. I stand, slowly forcing myself to my feet with a guttural breath. My hands bleed from the gravel. My hair's stuck to my face, damp with sweat and ash. "You should have checked the files a little deeper, Cole," I say. My voice is quiet, but it cuts the air like a knife. Some parts of my record aren't exactly accessible. Renko suddenly shifts as if trying to decide whether to raise his gun or lower it. I can feel the uncertainty ripple through the men behind him, mercs, smugglers, paid muscle. They came in thinking I was disposable. Now they're wondering if they're already dead, because this seal, it's not a decoration. It's a recall brand. You don't get it by applying. You don't even get it by surviving. You get it by being the last card in the deck when the government wants to make a situation disappear, the kind of missions no one writes reports about, the kind that leave people erased. I didn't want to use it again. Hell, I spent years trying to pretend it didn't exist, that I didn't exist. But when I saw Cole's betrayal coming and felt the burn of the lie in my chest again, I knew I'd have to dig it back up. Because there are some people who only speak one language, and it isn't peace. Another merc calls out in Spanish too fast for me to catch all of it, but I hear enough La Marca Negra, Alto Rango, Ejecución Fantasma, ghost execution. I grit my teeth, 1 heartbeat, 2, then I move. I sweep my right leg and knock Renko's ankle out from under him. He crashes to the ground with a choked yell. Before anyone can fire, I've grabbed his sidearm and pointed it straight at Cole. He doesn't flinch. That's the scariest part, don't I hiss. Don't even breathe. The jungle around us is quiet, but my ears are trained still. I hear it. A low rhythmic hum, faint but rising. Rotor blades. Not Colombian police. Not cartel. This is ours. They're coming. Because I activated the emergency code no one knew I still had. And now, everything changes. I didn't always carry secrets in my skin. 10 years ago, I was a Navy combat systems officer, fresh-faced, fiercely trained, and the youngest in my cohort to get fast-tracked into black tier operations. I was good, no excellent, not just with code or comms, but with battlefield command. I could talk down a drunk commander realign a convoy in a sandstorm or ghost through enemy fire with nothing but a headset and two hands. And I never cracked. Until Cole. Commander Nathaniel Cole was 10 years older, Harvard-educated, decorated, and as cold as a steel hull. At first, I thought that meant he was in control. Later, I learned it meant he was hiding. From decisions, from guilt, from what he'd done and would do again. We served together on a classified deployment to Eastern Africa in 2016. Officially, we weren't there. Unofficially, we dismantled a chemical lab that could have destabilized the region for decades. But that mission, it changed everything. We lost 2 operatives, one of whom was my best friend, Ensign Tara Bloom. We were inseparable back then. She had my 6, always, until the last second when she threw herself in front of an IED meant for me. Cole left her behind. I saw it with my own eyes. We were pinned behind a collapsed stairwell when she screamed through the radio. "I'm hit. Need extraction now." I was ready to go back for her. I begged him. She knew the risk, he said flatly. "She bought you 10 seconds. Use them. 10 seconds. That's all he gave her." I never forgot the look in his eyes, clinical detached, like he was calculating ROI on a spreadsheet, not a human life. After that, I knew I couldn't trust him. I buried it. We all buried it. There wasn't even a formal debrief. But the damage was done. Inside me, something began to crack. When we returned stateside, I asked to be reassigned. I told the brass I needed a break from ops wanted to train recruits. They said no. They had something better. Quieter. They called it Echo 7. It wasn't a unit. It was a designation. Blacker than black. I signed so many NDAs, I forgot how to speak English for a week, but they trained me again differently this time. Not for battlefields, for environments, psychological warfare, long-form infiltration. Conflict disruption was the official term. Strategic assassination was the real one. Only 12 of us carried the seal. I was the youngest. And when you're that deep in, they don't assign you missions. They reactivate you when all else fails. I stayed in for 5 more years. Then one day, just like that, it was over. "You're burned," they said. "Too visible, too exposed. Too many missions stacked." They gave me a medal no one could ever acknowledge and pushed me into civilian life with a pension and an apartment in Virginia. I spent the next 2 years drinking too much, running too far, and sleeping not at all. My body healed. My brain didn't. My therapist said I had operational identity collapse. I just called it ghost sickness. Then Cole came back. Out of nowhere, he called me. Said he was working private security, now helping the State Department liaise with partner forces in South America. He needed someone smart, someone trusted, someone like me. I should have hung up. I almost did. But then he mentioned Tara. "There's a file you need to see," he said. "It's about what happened in Mombasa." I hadn't heard that name in years. He said her death hadn't been random, that someone had leaked our location, that there was a mole still active. I said I was done with ops. He said this wasn't official. He said, "Don't you want to know why she really died?" That's how he got me. That's how I ended up 3 weeks later in a compound on the edge of the Colombian jungle in a team of so-called consultants sniffing out cartel-aligned militia who might have access to U.S. tactical schematics. It was supposed to be a recon trip, but it was a setup. From day one, I noticed the discrepancies, fake manifests, comms, blackouts routes that didn't match satellite data. And the men Cole brought in weren't government contractors. They were freelancers, killers. Men who didn't blink when civilians flinched. Then I found the case. Tucked inside a false wall. Black box. Marked USCN Vault Seal Clearance Sigma. Only 5 people in the world are authorized to open that. But it was open. Inside were mission logs, ones that shouldn't exist. Logs from Echo 7, with names, targets, locations. Some of mine. I took photos. Sent a 1-ping emergency code through a frequency I hadn't used in years, buried deep in a comms unit I'd smuggled in. That's when Renko caught me, and that's how I ended up kneeling in the dust, stripped of weapons, bruised, bleeding, and exposed. But in that moment when they saw the seal, something shifted. I remembered who I was. Not Rachel the vet. Not the burnout. I was Echo. I'd been trained to disappear, but more importantly, when necessary, I could reappear. And when that happened, people like Cole started praying to God a little faster. Because once Echo 7 is activated, there's no off switch. Only one directive. Neutralize the threat. And they had no idea just how far I was willing to go this time. I told you not to look inside that case. Cole's voice came from behind me, low, deliberate. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Men like him never get blood on their hands directly. That's what people like Renko are for. I didn't respond. Not yet. My arms were zip-tied behind my back, my cheek pressed into the dirt floor of the makeshift barracks. I could taste rust in my mouth, blood probably from the split lip I'd gotten when they dragged me out of the comms tent. I said he knelt beside me now, his breath warm and bitter at my ear. You weren't supposed to see that. I turned my head slowly, eyes locked on his. But I did. Cole studied me like I was a broken piece of equipment, not angry. Just disappointed that I'd stopped functioning the way he expected. That I wasn't the perfect, obedient ghost he'd once helped mold. You know how this works, Rachel, he said, brushing dirt off his sleeves as he stood. You could have kept your pension, stayed out of this. But now, well, now you're in the way. I felt the rage rise like old fire licking at dry bones, in the way of what I spat. Selling echo intel to narco militias, using dead names to cover your tracks. He smiled then. Smiled. A small, awful thing. You think you understand what you were part of, but you were a weapon, Rachel. Nothing more. Do you ask a missile why it gets launched? He turned to Renko. Put her in the cage. Quietly. They dragged me outside. The jungle at night is deafening frogs, howlers, some generator thumping in the distance. I counted my steps. 23 from barracks to the shed, 8 more to the cage, which was literally that reinforced steel bars welded into a shipping container. The floor was damp, mud and mildew, the kind of place you forget who you are in. They left me with nothing, not even boots. Just my torn uniform and a fractured memory of how quickly Cole had turned on me. But the betrayal didn't start there. I thought back to our last tour in Afghanistan. I was still under his command then. We'd done a dozen ops together. I trusted him, respected him. He'd even stood up for me once when a superior tried to pin a civilian casualty on my call. He makes the hard decisions I used to tell people. That's what good leaders do. I didn't realize until later that what he really did was make sure he had a scapegoat in every room. That day in Mombasa when Tara died wasn't a fluke. It was a pattern. He used people. And when they got too close or too smart, he let them burn. That's why he called me for Colombia. Not because I could help, because I could take the fall. He knew someone would eventually sniff around those mission logs. And when they did, he needed someone on site to blame. Someone with just enough clearance to make it plausible. And I'd walked right into it. I sat in that cage for 2 days. No food. Just water if you could call the yellow rain runoff in a dented canteen that. I thought about using the escape technique they taught us at Echo, the one that required dislocating both thumbs and chewing through the joint webbing in your fingers. But I waited, because I knew someone would come. When I sent that frequency ping Echo Shadow 2, there were only 3 people on Earth still authorized to see it. One of them was dead. One of them hated me. And the last one owed me his life. I just had to hold out long enough. On the 3rd night, I heard movement. Boots, 2 guards, laughing in Spanish about how I looked like a soaked cat. They didn't see the rusted screw I'd pried loose from the wall earlier, didn't see me slide it into my waistband. As they unlocked the door, I slumped forward like I was unconscious. One guard came in. The other stayed by the door, half distracted, checking his radio. I waited. 1 breath, 2, and then I moved. Fast, silent. I jabbed the screw into the first guard's thigh and used his momentum to knock the second one back into the door frame. Took his sidearm before he even hit the floor. By the time the camp alarm sounded, I was already in the trees. I didn't go far. just enough to loop around. I knew the layout. I'd helped build it after all when I still believed this was a real op. There was one place Cole never let anyone go, the storage bunker behind the helipad. I got there just before dawn. Inside was everything I feared and more. Not just Echo mission logs, not just sale manifests. There were body cams, helmets, lined up like trophies, and in the center of the room, my old mission pack. Still sealed, still marked with the Echo 7 crest, still tagged Rachel Pierce. Reactivation pending. That's when I knew. They'd never decommissioned me. I'd been kept on standby in case of containment emergencies. I was the emergency protocol. I wasn't supposed to survive this mission. I was the insurance policy to clean it up if something leaked and then vanish without a trace. They weren't just trying to kill me. They were trying to erase me. I took the files, the body cams, and then I did what I should have done 10 years ago. I started a war. I didn't cry. Not when I watched the footage of Echo agents being executed on camera by the same cartel Cole had partnered with. Not even when I saw Tara's face, her last op, the one that didn't make it back into the logs. But I came close when I saw my own name. My own voice recorded on a briefing cam instructing a squad to move through a village I had never even stepped foot in. They'd fabricated it. Clipped footage, repurposed audio, deep-faked logs. According to these files, I was responsible for 3 operations I never authorized and 2 civilian casualties that would bury me in tribunal hearings. And worst of all, they dated those missions for after my decommission. I sat in the bunker, flickering blue light from an old projector strobing against the sealed walls, and realized I was already dead. Legally, militarily. In the system, I didn't exist anymore. That's what the seal meant, the one they all feared. The Omega Crest. The seal that ends all missions. It was never an honor. It was a warning. You're the last resort, the final bullet in the chamber. And if you survive your use, you don't get a second life. You get buried, quietly, thoroughly. Cole had played the long game. I wasn't just the fall girl. I was the detonator. Once I realized that the weight hit me, everything I'd sacrificed, everyone I'd trusted. My parents died thinking I was still stationed in D.C. My brother hadn't heard from me in 4 years. My orders forbade outside contact for national continuity. Tara was gone. And every Echo member I'd trained with either ended up dead or ghosted by their own handlers. And now I was huddled in a foreign jungle bunker barefoot, bleeding with a kill order likely already circulating through encrypted satellite comms. The mission pack sat in front of me, still intact. That was the irony. Someone had taken the time to preserve my gear, my seal, my credentials, just in case they ever needed to resurrect me for one last job. And yet here I was, stripped, disowned, a memory that was never supposed to surface. I opened the pack. Inside, beneath the folded black recon fatigues and sealed medkit, was the original signal beacon, the one they gave us in case of catastrophic intel compromise. A one-use pulse emitter that pinged every black site satellite for 6 seconds. It would light me up like a flare in a blackout, but it would also notify the only person who could help me. Major Julian Cross, ex-CIA field operative, burned during Operation Serpent Echo. Rumor was he survived because someone sabotaged the blast radius of his extraction point. That someone was me. I hadn't seen him since. We weren't friends. Not really. But there's a bond in certain kinds of silence, like the silence of 2 people who both walked away from the same betrayal. I clutched the emitter. If I used it, it would either save me or confirm my location to every kill team Cole had in the region. I stared at it for 10 long minutes, and then I hit the button. The pulse jolted through the air. It didn't beep or flash, just a tiny vibration against my palm, cold and final. I waited. 6 minutes, 8, and then, boom. The ground trembled, not far, less than a click out. Probably a grenade or flashbang. Movement outside. 2 gunshots. Then silence. I ducked back against the wall, heart pounding, and then a whisper through the half-rusted comm unit inside the bunker, Raven 7. Confirm identity. Only one person used that codename for me. Raven 7, confirm identity. The voice repeated firmer. I pressed the transmit button. My hands shook. Raven 7. Confirmed. Cross, is that you, copy? You're late. Despite everything, I laughed. Cross didn't waste time. He never had. Within 7 minutes, he breached the bunker, his face covered in mud, and his rifle angled low but ready. He took one look at me and said, "Hell of a homecoming." I wanted to run to him. I wanted to collapse. But instead, I handed him the mission files. His face changed as he read. "They used you," he muttered. "They really did it. The SEAL protocol, Jesus Rachel." "They're erasing Echo," I said. "Starting with me." He nodded. "And they'll erase me too once they know I pulled you out." We stood there for a beat. Both fugitives now. Both relics of a shadow war nobody in the real world even knew had been fought. Cross reached into his pack and pulled out a burner device, an uplink module wrapped in foil. He plugged it into the projector system and began downloading everything. "Where are we taking this?" I asked. He didn't look up. "Washington," but not to the Pentagon. Then where he met my eyes. To the one place Cole can't touch. The tribunal court that buried me. My breath caught. The oversight committee. They'll never see us coming. He handed me a new uniform, black ops grade, no insignia. Not even a name tag. Just a patch on the shoulder, the Omega seal, but inverted. This time, he said, we're the end they didn't plan for. I changed in silence. My old uniform lay in the corner, bloodied and torn from the fight. As I pulled on the new one, something clicked deep inside me. Not vengeance. Not even justice. Just clarity. They made me into a weapon. But they forgot one thing. Weapons don't forget who pulled the trigger. And this time, I'm aiming back. Cross and I didn't speak for the first 2 hours of our exfil. Words weren't necessary. We moved through the jungle like ghosts, just like old times. We used infrared jammers, timed our steps to avoid pressure mines, and took alternate paths every mile. The mission discipline came back like muscle memory. But my mind wasn't on tactics. It was on the list. The one Cross decrypted from the mission files I pulled. The blacklist. 17 names, each with clearance levels above Echo Command, each tagged as either primary handler or SEAL architect. Cole's was at the top, of course. But others shocked me. A senator, 2 tech executives I recognized from public hearings, 1 flag officer from the Space Force, someone I'd saluted just 6 years ago, and beneath their names, status active. These weren't ghosts. These were the puppeteers. The people who wrote the play burned the actors and rewrote history to suit their empire. They built Echo, then buried it. And I'd helped. That guilt sat heavier than any of the wounds on my body. I didn't just serve the machine. I helped fine-tune it, until it erased me too. Cross finally broke the silence. "You're thinking about the list." I nodded. I trained 3 of the names on it. He looked sideways at me. So did I. We paused under a ridge where Cross reached into his pack and retrieved a small aluminum case. He opened it. Inside were 3 vials of microdata intelligence he'd been collecting since the day they burned him. Every time they tried to disappear one of us, he said, I kept a breadcrumb. He inserted the vials into the burner device we'd salvaged from the jungle bunker. As he did, the screen on his sat pad lit up with dots, lines, and coordinates. Global. Each one a black site. Each one a ghost story waiting to be confirmed. "This is enough to trigger a full oversight subpoena," I whispered. Cross didn't smile. "Only if we live long enough to deliver it." And that was the problem. We were 2 ghosts with 1 bullet left. We couldn't go through the Pentagon. That would trigger alarms. Couldn't go through civilian media, most of it was compromised. Only one route remained. The Oversight Committee on Unauthorized Operations and Covert Ethics, internal name, the Red Court. It existed inside the intelligence community's most secure tribunal, buried beneath layers of deniable architecture. You didn't request a hearing with them. You earned it by surviving something you were never meant to talk about. If we showed up, it would mean someone had failed to silence us. We had to make that happen. Our strategy needed 3 things: access, authentication, and a trigger. Access would come through Commander Eric Von Cross's last contact inside the Defense Inspectorate. Von owed him a life debt from an op in Chechnya, something neither of them ever logged. Authentication would require my seal. Not the tattoo on my back, the one burned into my shoulder blade when I first got assigned to Omega Tier. That was symbolic. No, the real proof was the embedded RFID chip inside the capsule they stitched into my collarbone. It still pinged under high-frequency sonar. My only unforgeable ID. And the Trigger A public exposure big enough to set off a wave of audit subpoenas. Something explosive. Something that would humiliate Cole in front of the very system he thought he controlled. I knew just the place. The annual Strategic Defense Gala. Every contractor, politician, general, and foreign attaché would be there, including Cole. It was his playground he hosted the last two. If we could get past security and activate the chip near a government-grade reader, my seal authentication would override their protocols. If we uploaded the blacklist at the same moment to the Red Court node, it would be checkmate. But it was suicide. 2 people against 20 private security teams, Cross muttered. We've done worse, I said. He gave me a look. Not without backup. That's when I had an idea. I accessed an old secure channel I hadn't touched in 5 years. EchoNet 77. Most believed it had been purged, its users deactivated, or dead. I sent one line of text. The seal breathes. The list is real. Washington needs witnesses. No signature, just coordinates and a timestamp. Then we waited. 12 hours later, in a safe house in Maryland, the first reply came. Pierce. This better not be bait. Tara's voice. Except no, not Tara. Tara's sister, Dinah, also ex-Echo. She'd gone dark when Tara died. Rumors said she turned to private ops in the Balkans. She hadn't trusted anyone since. More replies followed. Some I didn't recognize. Some I did, call signs like Switch Warden and Crux. All ghosts like me. All with something to prove. We met in a parking garage in Reston, 8 of us. Dirty, half-broken, but alive. When they saw me, silence fell. Then Dina stepped forward. You still have it, she asked. I turned and lowered the collar of my jacket, revealing the raised skin over my shoulder, the edge of the seal barely visible beneath the skin. One by one they nodded. We're in, she said, but this time you lead. I swallowed hard. Me, I hadn't led anything since they erased me. But maybe that was the point. The Strategic Defense Gala was held at the East Wing of the Arlington Sovereign Hotel, a fortress disguised as a ballroom. We had one shot. One entrance, one upload, and 0 room for mistakes. We called it Operation Crimson Echo. Dina handled comms. Cross led infiltration. I was the trigger. We dressed like shadows, civilian formal wear, custom fitted for concealment. I wore a sleek black backless gown that dipped just low enough to hide the scarred seal etched across my shoulder blade. Irony, maybe. I wanted Cole to see it when the moment came. A slow jazz ensemble played as guests poured in admirals, politicians, executives who'd never held a rifle, all toasting billion-dollar weapon systems they'd never have to use. It was nauseating, and Cole, of course, was center stage, standing like a Roman emperor in his pressed navy tuxedo, flanked by aides and private security. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner. But that smile hadn't changed. It was the same one he wore when he signed off on my termination memo, then toasted champagne with the same people who'd buried us. My blood boiled, but I didn't flinch. I was here for truth, not revenge. Cross's voice came over the earpiece. Perimeter mapped. Inner ring secure. Upload port at North Hall console tied to the Pentagon relay. You're clear on my mark. I moved through the ballroom, blending with the crowd. My heels clicked softly over marble floors, and every step took me closer to the heart of the beast. Dina's voice cut in. Firewall disruption initiated. 10 seconds to open path. I saw him, Cole, 10 feet away in conversation with a senator whose face I recognized from blacklist item number 9. I slowed my pace, waited for the signal. Cross whispered, now. I pivoted, stepped past the drinks bar, and entered the North Hall corridor. Everything happened in moments. 1. I reached the console, plugged in the capsule. 2. It blinked green. The RFID in my collarbone pinged authentication. 3. The seal lit up. Red, then blue, then white. It worked. Cross shouted into the comm upload streaming. Red court note accepting. 4% stay in position. Then came the crash. Not digital physical. Gunfire erupted in the ballroom. Crack, crack screams followed. Dinah shouted, "Contact 2 shooters west mezzanine. They're scrubbing the gala." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a random panic. Cole knew. He'd set the whole event as bait. I yanked the capsule out and tucked it into my bodice, sprinting back down the corridor as Cross shouted coordinates. The north exit was blocked. We were funneled toward the VIP elevators. Classic trap. Dinah barked, "We're splitting. Warden and Crux will draw fire. Rachel, you and Cross secure the seal. Get to Vaughn." We turned, ran. My heels shattered. I kicked them off mid-sprint feet, bleeding across the marble. Behind me, the echo of boots. 2, maybe 3 private security. Cole's men. We ducked into the loading dock. Cross shoved open a metal door leading to the underground garage. Then, suddenly, he was yanked back. Gunpoint. One of the guards, a bulky contractor with a scar under his eye, grabbed him by the collar and slammed him into the wall. Cross dropped hard. The guard aimed at his skull. "No!" I screamed. I moved without thinking. I pulled the emergency baton strapped to my thigh, leapt forward, and swung upward under the man's chin. Bone cracked. He staggered but didn't fall. His elbow smashed into my side. Pain exploded through my ribs. We wrestled, twisting, slipping on oil-slick concrete. My dress ripped open at the back, the seal now fully exposed. He saw it. He froze. Just like the others had. Then his hand dropped. He backed away. Not out of fear, but respect, like he'd just seen the insignia of a god. And that's when I understood. This mark, this cursed, burned, classified seal, was more than a symbol. It was power. He stepped aside. I yanked Cross up. He was bleeding from his temple, dazed but conscious. We dragged ourselves into the waiting SUV. Inside, Vaughn was already behind the wheel. He didn't speak, just nodded, drove. We fled across state lines, silent, bruised, leaking blood and data. At mile 46, Cross passed me the pad. Upload reached 87%, he murmured, but it was enough. The screen blinked, red court tribunal verified submission credential, R. Pierce seal. Echo 01 status summons issued. Aero 600 tomorrow location classified. It was real. Oversight was coming, for them. The next morning, I stood in a plain black suit in front of a reinforced tribunal wall. 3 judges, no names, only ranks. They didn't ask me how I escaped. They didn't ask why I returned. They asked one question. Is the evidence presented authentic, and does it implicate active defense personnel in the unauthorized use of black-tier human assets? I spoke clearly. Yes, and your seal. I reached behind, pulled back the collar of my shirt, and let the tribunal see it. The room went quiet. Then the presiding officer spoke. Proceed. I walked out of that chamber not as a fugitive, not as a soldier, but as the last witness to something they tried to erase. They weren't going to succeed. Not this time. I stood on the pier behind the old Naval Memorial in Annapolis, watching the wind ripple across the bay. The steel plaque at my feet read, "In valor there is hope." Funny thing, hope. After everything you'd think I'd want revenge. Maybe part of me still did. But what came next wasn't a takedown. It wasn't fury. It was reckoning. The tribunal moved swiftly. The evidence we extracted from Cole's vault linked him and over a dozen others to a buried directive called Project Night Vault. It was never supposed to exist, the seal on my shoulder. That wasn't just a mark of service. It was the identifier of Tier Echo Unit's operatives, so off-book they didn't exist even in the deepest Pentagon archives. Except we did exist. We bled. We obeyed. We died. And when they were done using us, they stripped us of everything. Pension record honor, like ghosts that never mattered. But ghosts don't stay buried. I testified under full immunity, not as Rachel Pierce, former petty officer, but as Echo 01. I named the bases. I marked the routes. I told them about Myra's Death Cross's burn injuries, the kids that never came home. And they listened. Because once the seal is verified, the system can't deny it. By law, any Echo unit activation triggers automatic congressional review. Cole knew that. That's why he tried to kill the upload. Too late. 6 officials were immediately suspended. Cole resigned before the charges hit. But his immunity deal didn't cover perjury. And the moment he denied authorizing covert Echo strikes in Eastern Sahara, well, let's just say the room turned very cold for him. He'll likely face federal charges, maybe prison, maybe exile. But I wasn't there to watch him fall. I left the courtroom before the verdict, because that wasn't my ending. 2 months later, I moved into a small fixer-upper in Colorado Springs. Quiet place, needs paint. But the porch gets good sunlight in the morning, and the local coffee shop knows me by name now. Cross stayed close. He's walking again, limping but upright. Sometimes he helps me with the renovations. Sometimes we just sit in silence and pretend the world didn't try to erase us. Dina's off-grid. Said she's somewhere in the Pacific Northwest with a goat and a shotgun. Sounds about right. Vaughn finally retired officially this time. He sent me a note last week. Just a napkin with the words, "You survived. I knew you would." I keep it pinned above my kitchen sink. Some nights I dream about the fight. Not the mission, the silence after. The way it felt to be stripped of everything. Standing in that courtroom, watching them lie. Knowing they'd already buried my name in some black folder and labeled me expendable. I used to think the worst pain was being betrayed. But it's not. The worst pain is being forgotten. That's what they tried to do to me, to all of us. And now they remember. Now they can't forget. Last week, I got a certified envelope from the Department of Naval Legacy Affairs. Inside was a ribbon, a citation, and a letter. It read, "In recognition of your honorable and classified service, and in light of recently declassified testimony, the United States Department of Defense hereby restores your active duty status retroactively effective the date of termination. Your record shall reflect meritorious conduct, successful execution of Echo Tier operations, and completion of final mission under SEAL authority." There was one more sentence handwritten at the bottom. "You were never expendable. We were just too cowardly to admit what we owed you." I cried when I read it. I hadn't cried in years. Not when Myra died, not when I saw my personnel file burned, not even when I stood in the dark, bleeding, holding the last piece of our mission against my chest like a broken oath. But I cried for this, because in that moment, I felt seen. You know, I used to believe strength meant silence, that the good soldier never complained, never broke down, never asked, "Why me?" But that's a lie they teach you to keep you obedient. Real strength is not staying quiet. It's speaking up even when your voice shakes, even when you know they'll try to shut you down, even when the people in charge look you dead in the eye and say your mission never happened. Even then you speak, and maybe, just maybe, someone listens. I still carry the seal on my back. I had the scar re-inked last week, darker this time, more visible. Because now it's not a secret, it's a warning. I survived your silence. I broke your system. You won't bury me again. If you're watching this because I know someone will leak this story eventually, then listen closely. There are thousands like me. People you never see, whose names never make the walls, who go on impossible missions and return home to find their apartments empty, their pay stopped, their records erased. Some of us vanish quietly, some of us don't. If you are one of them, don't stop fighting. If you are someone who's betrayed them, start looking over your shoulder, because one day, you'll see a woman with nothing left to lose, and you'll notice the mark on her shoulder, and you'll realize the mission isn't over, not until she says it is.